Beneath a moon veiled in frost, the little Omega's world shattered like ice under a careless boot, scattering fragments of her fragile hope into the endless night. Ilara huddled deeper into the shadow of the ancient pines, their gnarled branches clawing at the starless sky like desperate fingers. At 12 winters old, she had known the pack's cruelties all too well. Omegas were mere whispers of weakness, shadows to be trampled under the weight of stronger wills. But this night, rejection sank its fangs deeper than any claw could reach, twisting through her heart with a venom that chilled her to the marrow. Her father, the once proud beta warrior whose laughter had echoed through the dens like summer thunder, had fallen in the brutal border skirmishes. His blood had painted the snow in vivid crimson arcs under that same merciless moon. His final breath, a ragged plea for her safety. The pack alpha, her own uncle, whose face she had once trusted like a second father's, now regarded her with eyes as cold and unyielding as the steel of his ceremonial blade. "She is tainted," he had declared in the gathering circle, his voice booming over the assembled wolves. "A harbinger of misfortune that will drag us all into the abyss. Leave her to the wilds, let the goddess decide her fate." Banished without mercy, Ilara was thrust into the howling wilderness, her tiny hands clutching the only remnant of her shattered home, a silver medallion etched with a delicate crescent moon, its surface warm against her chilled chest from her father's last trembling embrace before the healers carried him away. The medallion pulsed faintly now, like a heartbeat not entirely her own, its edges scarred by an old claw mark that seemed to echo the fresh wound on her palm from the exile's ritual cut. A shallow slice meant to symbolize her severance from the pack's lifeblood. The metallic tang of her own blood mingled with the crisp, pine-scented air, a bitter reminder of the bond so cruelly severed. The snow fell heavier with each passing moment, blanketing the world in a suffocating white silence that was broken only by the distant weavos of the pursuing hunters, their calls slicing through the wind like accusations. Ilara's breath escaped in ragged frozen clouds, her bare feet long since numb in the deepening drifts, each step a battle against the encroaching cold that clawed at her threadbare cloak. Hunger gnawed at her belly like a feral beast, but it was the deeper ache in her soul that propelled her forward through the relentless storm. The profound loss of her father, whose strong arms had once shielded her from the world's harsh edges. The stinging betrayal of her pack, who now hunted her as if she were prey rather than kin. And the bone-deep isolation that wrapped around her like an invisible shroud, heavier than any chain. What strength could there possibly be in a child adrift in such vast indifference? She whispered to the medallion, her voice a fragile thread lost in the gale. "Father, why did they turn from us? Was our love not enough to hold them?" The metal seemed to hum in response, a soft, insistent vibration against her skin that sent a fleeting warmth through her veins. But the night offered no answers, only the indifferent gleam of the moon filtering through the clouds. As the wind whipped her matted hair across her tear-streaked face, stinging like tiny needles, she pressed onward, her small form a defiant speck against the towering peaks. The medallion's glow caught the lunar light, glinting like an unspoken promise amid the encroaching darkness, urging her toward an unknown horizon where survival might yet be wrested from despair. The storm's fury masked the scent of blood until it crashed upon her senses, thick and metallic, intertwining with the sharp, resinous bite of pine sap and the underlying musk of desperation. Ilara stumbled into a small clearing ringed by frost-laced boulders, her legs trembling from exhaustion, the medallion growing inexplicably warmer against her chest, almost burning through the thin fabric of her tunic as if alive with some inner fire. There, slumped against a jagged rock that jutted from the earth like a broken fang, lay the imposing figure of a man. No, not just any man, but a king in the throes of ruin. Thorn, the Alpha King of the Northern Realms, his massive frame battered and broken, his fur-lined cloak torn and matted with dark, congealing crimson that seeped into the snow around him. Legends had whispered of him across the packs, the ethical ruler who bore the crushing weight of his realm like a crown forged from thorns. Forever haunted by the guilt of a devastating war he had waged not for glory, but for survival, a conflict that had claimed countless lives and left scars on his soul deeper than any blade could carve. His silver eyes, usually sharp as polished steel, were dulled now by the haze of pain and blood loss, flickering open as her hesitant footsteps crunched closer, the air between them flaring with raw instinct, like flint struck against stone in the dead of night. She froze mid-step, her heart pounding a frantic rhythm against her ribs, the cold air turning her gasp into a visible plume. Alphas were the epitome of danger, embodiments of unbridled power that could crush the weak without a second thought. Yet this one radiated an unfamiliar vulnerability. A king brought low, his wounds perhaps inflicted by a traitor's hidden blade, or the insidious curse of his own unrelenting remorse that gnawed at him like an internal shadow. "Stay back, little one," he rasped, his voice rough as gravel, shifting under heavy boots, laced with exhaustion, but carrying no overt threat, only a weary curiosity that softened the edges of his gaze. Ilara's innate Omega senses stirred unbidden, drawn inexorably to the profound sorrow emanating from him, like heat from a dying fire, a sorrow that mirrored the jagged edges of her own grief with haunting precision. He smelled of acrid smoke from distant battlefields, of rich earth turned by clawed feet, of homes forsaken and victories hollowed by loss, scents that evoked the ghost of her father so vividly it stole her breath. Without conscious thought, driven by an impulse as primal as the moon's pull, she stepped forward through the snow, her small arms wrapping around his broad, heaving chest in a hug born of pure, unfiltered instinct. "You smell like my dad," she murmured, her voice muffled against his bloodied fur, tears freezing into crystalline beads on her lashes as memories flooded her. The warmth of her father's embrace after a long hunt, the steady rhythm of his heartbeat under her ear. The medallion pressed firmly between them, its warmth surging like a shared pulse, and for a fleeting moment, Thorn's rigid, battle-hardened form softened, surprise etching deep lines across his weathered features, his hand hovering uncertainly before resting lightly on her shoulder. But denial shadowed his silver eyes almost immediately, a wall of caution rising as swiftly as the storm winds. Such a connection was a dangerous luxury he could ill afford, not with the relentless hunters closing in from all sides, and his past a heavy chain forged from guilt and duty that dragged at his every step. Gently, with a reluctance that spoke volumes, he pushed her away, his touch lingering just a fraction too long, the spark between them flickering like fragile embers buried in the relentless snow. The wind howled louder, carrying the faint echo of pursuing paws, and Thorn's jaw tightened, his melancholic gaze scanning the tree line as the first drops of the intensifying blizzard began to fall, blurring the line between refuge and ruin. In the cave's dim, flickering glow, firelight danced across walls etched by the claws of forgotten ancestors, casting elongated shadows that whispered of secrets long buried in the mountain's unyielding heart. Thorn had gathered what remained of his fading strength to carry her here through the blinding blizzard, his powerful arms cradling her slight form as if she were the last fragile thread of his unraveling world, defying the deep gashes that wept fresh blood onto the uneven stone floor with every labored step. The cave, a natural hollow carved deep into the mountain's frozen core, offered only the scantest shelter from the raging storm outside, its entrance partially obscured by dangling icicles that tinkled like mournful chimes in the gusts. But it was refuge enough to stave off the immediate bite of death. Ilara watched him intently from her perch on a makeshift bed of pine boughs, her wide eyes tracing the deliberate movements as he tore strips from his tattered cloak to bind the worst of his wounds, the fabric darkening with the steady seep of crimson. Hesitantly, she extended the medallion toward him, her small hands trembling not from cold, but from the vulnerability of offering something so precious. "It helps," she said softly, her voice barely rising above the fire's crackle, though she couldn't explain why she believed it. Perhaps it was the way the silver disk had always seemed to absorb her father's pain in his final hours, or the inexplicable warmth it now exuded like a living talisman. The medallion, cool to the touch against his fevered, sweat-slicked skin, seemed to draw the fire from his veins, its crescent etching catching the flames and reflecting a soft, ethereal glow in his silver eyes, as if mirroring a shared, unspoken memory that bridged their disparate worlds. Enemies pursued them with unyielding ferocity, the remnants of her old pack, driven by superstition and the Alpha's decree to erase any trace of taint, and the rival Alphas who coveted Thorn's throne, fueled by insidious whispers of his faltering rule and the vulnerabilities exposed by his solitary flight. As the thunderous echo of paws pounding through the snow grew perilously close, reverberating through the cave walls like the heartbeat of an approaching predator, they huddled closer to the fire's meager warmth, its orange tongues licking at the chill-laden air, the only sound punctuating the thick tension besides the occasional snap of burning wood. Empathy blossomed slowly in that charged silence, fragile as the first thaw after endless winter. Thorn, his voice low and measured, began to speak of his burdens, the crushing guilt over lives lost under his command, in wars he had never sought, the relentless duty that chained him to a throne built on the bones of the fallen, his ethical core a double-edged sword that both guided and tormented him. Ilara, emboldened by the fire's light, shared fragments of her own exile, the sting of her uncle's betrayal, the void left by her father's absence, the medallion's persistent warmth serving as an invisible bridge between their isolated pains, drawing them into a tentative orbit. What had begun as raw fear twisted gradually into something deeper, more profound, a bond forged in the shared crucible of the encroaching chill and the mutual recognition of souls adrift. When the hunter's howls pierced the night once more, sharp and insistent, growing ever nearer like a tightening noose, Thorn's large hand found hers in the dimness, his grip firm yet gentle as he pulled her into the protective shadows at the cave's rear. The medallion pulsed brighter in response, its light cutting through the gloom like a silent vow, a beacon of resilience amid the storm's unrelenting fury, as they braced for whatever trial the dawn might bring. And now, I invite you to leave a trace of your presence in the comments. Tell us where in the world you're watching from, and the exact hour you hear this story. We wish to know how far these northern confessions travel, and at what moments of the night they find you. Dawn's pale, hesitant light filtered through the narrow mouth of the cave, illuminating the intricate etchings on the medallion as if awakening an ancient, forgotten script inscribed by the goddess herself. Ilara stirred from a fitful sleep to find Thorn's watchful gaze fixed upon her, the air inside the shelter thick with unspoken questions, and the lingering scent of smoke from the dying embers. The night had woven invisible threads between them, binding their fates in subtle ways, but the encroaching daylight brought a harsh clarity, and with it the ever-present specter of peril that shadowed their every moment. As they finally ventured out into the thawing world beyond, the medallion thrummed insistently against Ilara's chest, its heat building with each deliberate step through the snow-laden forest, where branches heavy with frost bowed low like weary sentinels. The air was alive with the crunch of their footfalls and the distant call of ravens, but suddenly, without warning, visions assailed her with the force of a winter gale. Vivid flashes of Thorn's shadowed past, brutal battles waged under blood-red moons that stained the sky, a profound betrayal at the hands of his own brother that had not only scarred his flesh with jagged lines, but had etched an indelible wound upon his soul, festering like poison in his veins. She gasped sharply, her knees buckling as she collapsed into the soft drift of snow, the medallion glowing with a fierce, otherworldly intensity that lit her face from within. "I see it all," she whispered, her voice trembling with the weight of the revelations, tears carving warm paths down her cold cheeks as the images swirled. Thorn's hand hesitating over a fallen comrade, the brother's sly smile in the council chamber, the curse that bound the king to endless cycles of remorse. Thorn dropped to one knee beside her, shock widening his silver eyes to mirrors of the dawn sky, his breath catching in his throat as the implications dawned. This little Omega, cast aside like refuse, was no ordinary survivor lost to the wilds. She was a rare pathfinder, bearer of a hidden gift bestowed by the goddess herself, the ability to glimpse the intricate tapestries of destinies woven through time and blood. The medallion, Handed down from her father, a long-forgotten seer whose talents had been dismissed as madness by the pack, marked her unmistakably as the key to unlocking Thorn's path to redemption, a living conduit to the truths he had buried beneath layers of duty and denial. Fear and awe warred across his features, a storm of emotions that tightened his jaw and quickened his pulse. This child, so small and rejected, held in her innocent grasp the very thread that could unravel the curse entwining his life, stirring long-suppressed instincts within him that whispered of protection, of purpose renewed. Yet the connection terrified him to his core, awakening vulnerabilities he had armored against for years, the raw pull of her gift clashing with his rational barriers. As the wivios of distant pursuers echoed once more through the valleys, a reminder of the enemies that never truly rested, Thorn lifted her gently into his arms, her slight weight a poignant contrast to the burdens he carried. The medallion's light guided their path deeper into the unforgiving peaks, its glow weaving through the mist like a lantern in the fog, as the full weight of revelation settled upon them. A turning point where exile met destiny under the watchful eye of the rising sun on frost-kissed horizons. The pack's sprawling encampment loomed ominously under a sky bruised with heavy storm clouds, torches flickering like accusatory eyes in the gathering dusk, their flames casting erratic shadows across the trampled snow. Thorn and Alara approached under the cover of deepening twilight, the medallion's subtle glow carefully concealed beneath the folds of her threadbare cloak, its warmth a constant, reassuring presence against the chill that seeped into their bones. Confrontation was as inevitable as the tides of the moon. The rival Alpha, Thorn's treacherous brother whose ambition had festered like an untreated wound, had rallied fractured packs with honeyed promises of unchallenged power, decrying the king's lingering guilt as irredeemable weakness that invited chaos upon the realms. Alara's visions, sharp and unrelenting, had guided them unerringly here, unveiling the rotten core of the betrayal, a stolen lunar artifact, a relic of the goddess that bound Thorn's fate in invisible chains, now wielded as a weapon to amplify the rival's deceit. As they slipped through the periphery of the encampment, weaving past guarded tents where the air hummed with tense murmurs and the acrid scent of wood smoke mingled with the metallic tang of oiled blades, the atmosphere thickened with barely contained hostility, every rustle of leaves a potential alarm. The clash erupted without mercy, plunging the night into chaos, claws raking through fresh snow in lethal arcs, guttural howls piercing the frigid air like shards of ice, the metallic clash of fangs and steel echoing off the surrounding cliffs. Thorn faced his brother in the heart of the fray, their forms blurring in a whirlwind of fur and fury, blade meeting blade with sparks that illuminated the hatred etched on the traitor's face, while Alara darted through the edges of the melee, her small form a fleeting shadow amid the towering wolves, her heart racing with terror and resolve. Moral dilemmas tore at her young soul like thorns. Should she forgive the uncle who had exiled her with such cold finality, condemning her to a death of slow starvation, or stoke the flames of war that had already claimed her father's life in its insatiable maw? Thorn, bloodied and resolute, his cloak shredded and his breaths coming in labored bursts, embodied the ethical struggle in every swing of his sword. He chose mercy over the seductive pull of vengeance, halting his blade mere inches. From his brother's throat, his voice a gravelly thunder amid the din. Blood for blood only begets more shadows. End this, or face the goddess's judgment alone. But the choice exacted a grievous toll, demanding sacrifices that burned like the torches around them. Alara's gift surged forth in a torrent, the medallion flaring to life in her grasp, its light shattering the illusions woven by the stolen artifact and exposing the rival's web of lies to the assembled packs in a cascade of undeniable truth. Gasps rippled through the crowd as deceptions unraveled, alliances forged in greed, prophecies twisted for gain, turning the tide as loyalties fractured and reformed in the firelight. Thorn's unyielding ethical core shone through the veil of his guilt like a beacon, binding Alara's fierce loyalty to him in that crucible moment, her small hand finding his amid the settling snow. Yet the siren call of freedom whispered temptations. Flee into the wilds once more, unburdened by the weight of thrones and betrayals, or stand firm in the storm. The judgment hung heavy in the air, thick as the falling flakes, the moon emerging from behind the clouds to witness their fractured souls, illuminating the precipice upon which their choices balanced, teetering between ruin and renewal. Under the full moon's unyielding silvery gaze, the ancient temple ruins cradled their weary forms like the arms of a long-forgotten deity, the weathered stones humming with latent lunar power that resonated through the crisp night air. The confrontation in the encampment had shattered fragile alliances like brittle ice, scattering loyalties to the winds. But in its wake, the stirrings of rebirth took root, tentative yet profound, amid the ruins that spoke of empires risen and fallen under similar celestial witnesses. Thorn, partially freed from the curse's iron grip by the clarity of Alara's piercing visions, knelt before her in the temple's shadowed heart, his massive frame humbled by the weight of what she had revealed and the strength she had shown. The medallion, once a solitary token, had reformed in the purifying fire of their shared trial, its silver now encircling both their necks like a shared chain of destiny, its crescent glow pulsing in harmony with their synchronized breaths. Her gift had delved beyond the surface of his physical wounds, reaching into the festering shame that had long poisoned his spirit, unveiling the goddess's intricate design, an Omega's unyielding compassion destined to crown a king's mercy, transforming rejection into a forge for redemption. Ilara, no longer the trembling child adrift in exile's void, chose union over the lonely pull of isolation, her innocent hug from that fateful encounter in the clearing evolving into a profound bond of mutual salvation, woven from threads of trust and shared vulnerability. Sacrifice marked every step of this path. Thorn yielded the suffocating isolation of his throne, the endless solitude of command that had eroded his soul, in exchange for this unlikely alliance that breathed life back into his weary heart, while Ilara embraced her role as Pathfinder with a maturity beyond her years, trading the remnants of her stolen innocence for a purpose that illuminated the darkness, her visions now a compass for realms adrift. As the snow fell softly around them, blanketing the ruins in a hush of white purity, their hands clasped firmly, the medallion's enduring warmth sealing an unspoken vow that echoed through the stones. Love, so long resisted in the face of duty and fear, rationalized away as folly, finally accepted not as a glittering reward, but as irrefutable proof of their resilience. True strength lay in choosing one another amid the rubble of tragedy, in defying the wilds that sought to claim them. The wind carried away the last fading echoes of war's clamor, sweeping through the temple arches with a cleansing sigh, birthing a new dawn from the embers of despair. In that sacred space, under the moon's benevolent watch, they rose together, the air alive with the subtle shift of seasons turning, promising that from the depths of suffering, renewal could emerge like the first green shoots piercing frozen earth. Their bond, forged in blood and moonlight, stood as a testament to the goddess's subtle handiwork, a quiet revolution against the hierarchies that had once condemned them both. Subscribe if you believe mercy can crown even the fallen. Whispers of the old betrayal lingered persistently like tendrils of smoke, curling through the thawing valleys, their insidious tendrils snaking into every crevice of the fragile peace they had painstakingly forged, testing the bonds of trust with every subtle shift in the wind and flicker of uncertainty in the dim light. Thorn led Ilara along the hidden, serpentine paths of the northern realms, winding through mist-shrouded ravines where jagged rocks rose like the spines of ancient beasts slumbering beneath the earth, the air heavy with the damp scent of melting snow and the faint metallic tang of exposed stone. The medallion's dual glow served as a steadfast beacon against the encroaching dusk, its soft silver light cutting through the gathering gloom like a thread of unyielding hope, casting elongated shadows that danced along the path ahead, mirroring the internal shadows that still haunted their steps. Guilt, that ever-present shadow companion to Thorn, clawed at the edges of his mind with renewed ferocity, sharper now in the quiet aftermath of victory. haunting visions of fallen warriors whose lifeless eyes seemed to accuse him from the recesses of his dreams, their faces pale and frost-kissed, mouths frozen in silent pleas for the lives cut short by his commands. The echoes of choices made in the blistering heat of battle reverberated through his nights like distant thunder rolling across empty plains, each one a stark reminder of the ethical tightrope he had walked for years, balancing the weight of a crown against the blood it demanded. His broad shoulders, scarred from countless skirmishes, tensed under the fur cloak as these phantoms stirred, the chill air biting at his exposed skin like accusatory fingers. Ilara walked beside him, her small hand occasionally brushing his for reassurance, her own thoughts a whirlwind of nascent fears and budding resolve, the medallion's warmth a constant anchor against the chill that seeped into her bones. Her gift offered glimpses of potential healing, fleeting fragments of futures where compassion acted as a balm, mending the rents torn by swords and claws, visions of packs gathered under harmonious moons rather than divided by territorial snarls. But these were mere whispers against the growing unrest stirring in the lowlands below. The remnants of fractured packs, those who had once bowed to the rival's deceit, now roused with a restless energy, drawn inexorably by insidious rumors that spread like frost across the realms. Tales of the king's softened rule, painting his mercy as a fatal frailty, his unlikely bond with the exiled child as a dangerous omen that invited chaos and weakness into the heart of power. The wind carried these murmurs up the slopes, faint but persistent, laced with the howls of discontented wolves who saw opportunity in the perceived cracks of Thorn's ethical armor. In a secluded frozen glade, where ancient oaks stood as silent sentinels with bark cracked and weathered like the skin of elders who had witnessed too many winters, they stumbled upon a ragged band of survivors from Ilara's old pack, gaunt figures huddled around a sputtering fire, their fur matted and eyes hollow with the desperation of those teetering on the edge of starvation. The air thickened instantly with the acrid scent of unwashed pelts and simmering resentment, a palpable tension that made the hairs on Ilara's neck prickle. One of the survivors, a burly beta with a scar twisting his muzzle into a perpetual snarl, rose to his full height, his voice a guttural rumble that sliced through the quiet like a blade. "Traitor's spawn returns with the fallen king. Have you come to drag us all into your cursed fate?" The words ignited the old wounds of exile like salt ground into an open cut, flooding Ilara's mind with vivid memories. The sting of her uncle's cold decree echoing in the pack circle, the relentless howls of pursuit through endless nights, the bone-deep isolation that had nearly shattered her spirit into irreparable fragments. Her breath caught, a sob threatening to escape, but she clenched her fists, feeling the medallion pulse urgently against her chest, its warmth surging like a call to arms, urging confrontation over the instinct to flee into the underbrush. Thorn positioned himself protectively in front of her, his massive frame a wall against the group's advancing menace, his silver eyes gleaming with a melancholic resolve that softened the edges of his warrior's gaze. His voice, low and measured like the rumble of a distant avalanche, wove through the tension, recounting the rival's deceit with unflinching, harrowing detail. The stolen artifacts' insidious illusions that had twisted truths into lies, the lives upended and shattered by unchecked greed, the blood spilled not in honorable combat, but in shadows of betrayal. His words were laced with the profound weight of his own remorse, confessions of nights spent staring at the moon in silent atonement, yet they remained unyielding in their ethical clarity, a testament to the man who chose light over the easy descent into vengeance. The survivors shifted uneasily, murmurs rippling through them like wind through dry leaves, some averting their eyes while others gripped their weapons tighter. Ilara, drawing upon the nascent strength that had been reborn within her through fire and revelation, stepped forward despite the fear knotting her gut like icy vines, her small voice steady as she invoked her Pathfinder sight. A vision unfolded before her inner eye, vivid and compelling, unveiling a fragile tapestry of unity amid the glade's crystalline frost, packs mending under shared lunar cycles, compassion bridging the chasms once thought eternal and unbridgeable, wolves of rival bloodlines sharing the warmth of dens rather than the fury of hunts. Her words flowed soft but resolute, painting these pictures with a child's unfiltered honesty. A bridge extended across the chasm of old hatreds, evoking the scent of fresh kills shared in peace, the sound of pups playing without fear of borders. The group fell silent, the fire's crackle the only accompaniment, as doubt flickered in their eyes, warring with ingrained suspicions. Yet doubt gnawed at the edges of Thorn and Alara's own resolve, a persistent whisper, asking if such profound compassion could truly mend the fractures that power had carved so deeply into the fabric of their world, or if the shadows of the past would reclaim the fragile light they had kindled, extinguishing it in a surge of renewed conflict. As night fully descended, draping the glade in a velvet darkness pierced only by the medallion's persistent glow and the dying embers of the survivors' fire, they bid a tentative farewell to the group, some nodding in wary acceptance, others turning away, and pressed onward through the tangled underbrush. The moon's pale light filtered through the canopy in silvery shafts, illuminating frost-laced ferns and the occasional glint of animal eyes watching from the gloom, serving as a poignant reminder that redemption was no swift balm to apply and forget, but an arduous path to be walked in tandem, step by shadowed step, through the lingering mists of betrayal and loss, with each encounter a test of the bond they had forged. Torches blazed fiercely in the grand hall of the ice castle, their leaping flames devouring the chill air and casting long, wavering shadows that danced across the vaulted ceilings like restless specters of unresolved fates, illuminating walls of translucent blue ice that gleamed with captured moonlight, refracting the light into 1,000 prismatic shards that played across the assembled faces. Word of Thorn and Alara's improbable bond had spread through the northern realms like wildfire, racing across dry tinder, igniting conversations in every den and outpost, summoning a tense council of alphas to the castle under the thin pretense of forging lasting alliances, but laced throughout with treacherous undercurrents that hung in the air as palpably as the heavy scent of melting wax and oiled leather. The hall, a cavernous expanse carved from the mountain's frozen heart, echoed with the low growls and sharp exchanges of the gathered leaders, fur-clad figures from distant packs, their eyes sharp and calculating, claws tapping rhythmically against the arms of their icy thrones. Thorn, ever marked by the crushing weight of his royal duty, stood at the head of the long obsidian table, his broad frame silhouetted against the roaring hearth, facing a relentless barrage of demands to reclaim his throne through the familiar, brutal paths of war and conquest, calls for border raids, alliances sealed in blood oaths, the subjugation of dissenters to restore the iron order that had defined his rule. His brother's lingering followers lurked in the hall's shadowed alcoves, their forms half hidden behind marble pillars veined with frost, eyes glinting with malice as they whispered plots woven in secrecy during the long journey to this summit, schemes to undermine the king, to paint his mercy as madness. Alara stood at his side, a small but unwavering presence amid the giants, her cloak dusted with the snow from their arduous trek, feeling the medallion's heat build insistently against her chest, like the insistent drumbeat of a warning, its pulse syncing with the rapid thrum of her heart amid the opulent yet oppressive chill of the chamber. The air was alive with the crackle of flames, the musky scent of alpha dominance, and the faint underlying tang of fear from those who sensed change on the horizon. Dilemmas swirled around them like the eddies of smoke rising lazily from the braziers flanking the hall, power tempted with the seductive illusion of security, a fortified bulwark against the wilds that had nearly claimed their lives in exile, promising thrones unassailable and packs united under fear rather than fragile trust. Yet compassion whispered insistently from the depths of their shared trials, speaking of a truer strength, the kind born not from domination and the crush of wills, but from the quiet, perilous courage to forgive, to extend a claw not in strike but in alliance. As the council's voices escalated into a cacophony of arguments and barely veiled threats, the atmosphere thickening with the metallic edge of impending violence, Ilara's Pathfinder gift surged forth once more, unbidden and overwhelming, her vision piercing the veil of deception like a blade slicing through morning fog. The images cascaded through her mind with crystalline clarity, a final, insidious treachery unveiled in the form of a poisoned chalice, its ornate silver surface etched with false runes of peace, offered across the table in the guise of a ceremonial truce by one of the brothers' sly adherents. The contents shimmered innocently in the torchlight, a deep crimson liquid that mimicked fine wine, but was laced with a potent toxin distilled from nightshade and wolfsbane, potent enough to fell even a king in agonizing silence, its vapors already curling subtly into the air. With a cry that cut through the din like a clarion call from the goddess herself, raw and piercing, echoing off the ice walls, Ilara lunged forward, her small hands seizing the chalice and shattering it against the unyielding stone floor. The vessel exploded in a spray of shards, the blood-red wine spilling in rivulets that snaked across the ice like symbolic veins of sacrifice, staining the pristine surface in dark, accusing patterns that evoked the spilled lifeblood of innocence under merciless lunar skies, the acrid fumes rising to confirm the treachery. Gasps echoed through the grand hall, a collective intake of breath that silenced the room in an instant as the truth rippled outward like shockwaves from a struck drum, loyalties fracturing like the chalice itself under the weight of revelation, alphas recoiling from the betrayer, whispers turning to outright snarls, the air electric with the shift from suspicion to dawning realization. Thorn, his face a mask of resolute calm amid the unfolding chaos, his silver eyes locking onto Ilara's with a depth of gratitude and fierce protection, chose her path without a moment's hesitation, rising to his full, imposing height. His voice, resonant with the hard-won wisdom forged in the crucibles of exile and rebirth, boomed through the hall like thunder heralding a storm's end, denouncing the call to war in favor of an extended bridge of forgiveness, a radical offer of mercy to former enemies, positioning compassion as the unshakable cornerstone of his renewed reign, promising realms healed not by conquest, but by shared destinies under the moon's impartial gaze. He spoke of the visions Ilara had unveiled, of paths untrodden where pacts thrived in unity, his words weaving ethics into a tapestry that challenged the old ways, evoking the warmth of communal firesides over the cold isolation of endless battles. The grand hall fell into a profound, weighty silence, broken only by the persistent crackle of flames in the hearth and the distant howl of wind against the castle walls, as allegiances shifted like sand under the tide's relentless pull, faces transforming from hardened hostility to tentative awe, some alphas nodding slowly while others exchanged uneasy glances. Freedom versus love? The choice crystallized in that charged moment, sharp and unyielding as the castle's towering frozen spires piercing the night sky, their bond emerging as a defiant, enduring flame against the encroaching cold of doubt and division, illuminating the profound cost of ethical leadership, the profound solitude it demanded in the face of opposition, the inherent risks it invited from those wedded to power's darker paths, yet the radiant, enduring light it promised for generations to come. As the council dispersed into the enveloping night, murmurs of tentative change trailing them like echoes, Thorn placed a gentle hand on Ilara's shoulder, the medallion's glow a quiet, affirming pulse between them, their path forward etched indelibly in the smoldering embers of decisions that would redefine not just their fates, but the very soul of the northern realms. The mountain summit, crowned by eternal blankets of pristine snow that sparkled like scattered diamonds under the vast canopy of stars, bore solemn witness to their union under a moon swollen with the ancient, inexorable promise of cycles unbroken and destinies meticulously fulfilled, its silvery light bathing the peak in an ethereal glow that seemed to infuse the very air with sacred intent. Thorn and Ilara stood at the pinnacle's ragged edge, where the wind whipped around them in a wild symphony of howls that carried the raw essence of the untamed wilds far below, gusts laden with the crisp bite of pine resin and the faint, earthy undertone of distant rivers thawing in the valleys. The medallion, transformed through the gauntlet of their trials into a single unbroken circle of burnished silver, now linked their fates irrevocably, its surface etched with the intimate scars of their shared odyssey, the faint claw marks from Ilara's exile ritual, the radiant glow lines from moments of revelation, the enduring warmth that spoke of rebirth's quiet fire. The trials they had weathered together had stripped them bare to their most vulnerable cores, the stinging, soul-deep rejection that had once defined Ilara's every waking breath and tearful night, reducing her to a shadow of the child she had been. The burdensome guilt that had shadowed Thorn's every step like a faithful, unrelenting hound, its weight bowing even his mighty frame. Yet from those scorched ashes rose a profound, resilient rebirth, radiant and unyielding, defying the rigid hierarchies and cruel traditions that had once sought to diminish and discard them both. Far below in the shadowed valleys, the packs, once fractured by betrayal and ambition, had gathered in unprecedented numbers, swayed by the undeniable, transformative example of their mercy and visionary guidance, their uivios rising in harmonious waves that cascaded up the slopes like a living river of sound, a chorus of unity rather than the discordant fury of hunts past, echoing the profound shift from division to collective purpose. Ilara's gift, once hidden like a fragile seed buried beneath layers of frozen soil and doubt, now bloomed fully into its destined potency, guiding the realm toward uncharted paths of empathy and solidarity, visions of borders dissolved, shared hunts under equal moons, the healing of old wounds through rituals of forgiveness rather than retribution. It proved beyond the shadow of any doubt that an Omega's tender, intuitive heart could mend the deepest, most festering wounds of a king, not merely the gashes on his flesh, but the fractured spirit of an entire people, weaving redemption from the threads of rejection and loss. In the wind's gentle, caressing embrace, carrying the faint, nostalgic scent of pine groves and the distant, comforting smoke of communal fires, they drew close atop the summit, their forms silhouetted against the moon's majestic arc, and embraced with a depth that transcended words. The medallion's enduring warmth radiating between them like a shared heartbeat, a living testament to love as the unyielding forge of redemption, tempering the raw pain of their journeys into something unbreakable and luminous. No grand, glittering reward awaited them in this hard-won peace, no crowns of gold or thrones of ease, only the quiet, profound victory of choices made in the unrelenting face of adversity, mercy embraced over the easy, intoxicating allure of might and domination, destiny not imposed by fate's cold hand, but willingly claimed through acts of courageous will. Freedom discovered not in isolation, but in the vital, tethering bonds that now defined them. As the stars wheeled slowly overhead in their eternal, graceful dance, tracing patterns that the goddess herself might have etched, Thorn leaned close to Ilara, his breath warm against the chill, his voice a hushed whisper carried on the breeze like a sacred incantation. What is strength, if not choosing mercy when the world demands blood, and finding light in the heart of endless night? Their path forward stretched into the boundless horizon, illuminated by the intricate interplay of lunar fire, the moon's soft glow on snow, and the hard, indelible lessons of blood spilled in vain and spared in wisdom, promising a legacy woven from the raw, unfiltered threads of suffering, betrayal, and hard-fought compassion into an enduring tapestry of light, one that would echo through the northern realms for generations, inspiring wanderers and warriors alike to seek their own redemption in the lingering shadows of personal exiles, under the watchful, benevolent eye of the eternal moon. If your heart beat alongside ours, comment and subscribe, because every soul that joins our moon keeps the flame of redemption alive.